There, after almost 3 weeks of daily painting, my 1992 Warhammer Fantasy Battles Teclis is done. Hi, my name is Otso, and thank you for joining me on this trip down memory lane. Today we're gonna learn a lot while we're gonna paint one of my first ever miniatures. This is Teclis, the Prince and Lore Master of the High Elves, and my second ever miniature I got as a kid. In this video we're gonna see how I paint this miniature step by step, but it's not a tutorial. I did most of the work off camera and I had to do a lot of back and forth until I got something that I liked. And because this miniature in particular is very important to me, I wanted to try my limits as a painter and show you that with enough effort and the right mindset, you can get anything done. It's just about picking up the brush and starting. I actually started off this project by stripping off the paint, even before I started this channel, and intended it to be the first video. But as fear of not doing a good enough job, I pushed him aside for a while. So the stakes and expectations are really high. So why did it take so long to paint? Well, mostly just my style of painting is doing everything really slow and over again until I like the result. That is also why you may see things change behind the scenes. Also, this miniature is probably one of the hardest I've ever painted because of the lack of sharp edges and details, which would have been very hard to achieve actually at the time, since the models were sculpted by hand, so a lot of the painting just feels like freehanding on an uneven surface. But in the end, I think it's one of the coolest looking miniatures from that time. In this paint job, I really wanted to challenge myself painting this rare old miniature, so I came up with a few personal goals. I wanted to try many different things at once, which in hindsight probably wasn't the best idea. First and foremost, I wanted it to look 90s. Even though the color scheme I came up with is not according to the lore or any guidelines, I wanted the paint job to feel period correct. So bright colors and stark contrast, as the style was in the 90s. Secondly, I've never painted non-metallic metals before, so why not try it on this ancient model that has so many different shapes and horrible uneven edges? Shouldn't be a problem, right? And thirdly, no washes. I've been experimenting on glazing and using different colors to make the shadows and highlights. I really like the style that it brings, so no washes at all? Sure, willingly actually got a fourth challenge as well. Just finish the model. As this one was probably the most job I've ever put into one miniature, but just holding on to the challenges and not giving up has grown me so much as a miniature painter. So the challenges are set, let's start painting. The stripping of the old paint came first. Teclis had a nice swim in acetone with some other old metallic friends from various tabletop franchises. I have since sold some of them, but I kept the best ones for myself. Leave a comment if you recognize any of them. When the acetone had done its job, it was time to scrub. I wore gloves, of course, but they melted away almost instantly. I have since upgraded for other methods of stripping minis that are not so hazardous, because I buy, sell and strip a lot of older miniatures these days, but I have kept the best ones for myself. I'll show you some of my recent purchases in the next video. A few days after the stripping process, I gave the miniatures a zenithal prime. When I got to the painting, I noticed there were some shiny gaps left that the primer didn't get to, so I had to paint it black with a brush. So that's why the prime looks so clumsy at this point. But I still left some areas lighter, so that the extra step in the priming was not a complete waste. I started by base coating the biggest areas of the model. Some cracked blue on the cape, and probably something like 20 coats of white on the cloak. Next up, I started shading the cape and making the line between the cloak and the cape more neat. I wanted to use some purple on this model, since I remember painting some of the capes of my elves with purple when I was a kid, so I had to mix my own with matte cracked blue, white and some red and black contrast paint. The gap in between gave me a lot of trouble since the sculpt was very uneven in the cross section. Some wash could have handled it pretty easily, but I wanted to paint this model without any wash, so some fine lines of a dark purple I mixed was added to the crevice. Even though the contrast paint acts a bit like a wash, my intention was not to use it like that. It simply just was the darkest red I had and seemed to be the best mix after several mixes I did. I thinned it down with water to almost a glaze and painted it very neatly into the folds of the cape and darker areas for many layers for a smooth blend. I also painted the parts that were going to be red with the same dark purple for a nice shadow. I decided to paint everything else dark brown so that I could get a better image in my head on what I was working on. Next, I started to build up the lighting of the cape. I built back up from the purple with more dark blue and a mix of other lighter blues. I really like playing with colors and lights on the capes, since it makes up for a much more interesting result, but it really doesn't seem out of place. And for this instance, it builds up from a dark purple to a light turquoise. Next, for the parts I painted previously with purple, I painted over with corn red, trying to avoid the crevices so that it would leave a nice contrast. I decided I wanted more purple, so I put it in a couple of places, but then I decided against it later in the painting process and just switched the colors. Still, the dark purple will act as a nice recessed shadow. I base coated some of the white parts, and at this point I got so frustrated on rubbing off the paint accidentally all the time that I went out and sprayed the model with a varnish that could act as sort of a checkpoint and reduce the rubbing of the paint. I also took this picture and amped up the contrast because it will work as a pretty good map for the non-metallics. Next was the skin tone. I wanted it to be fairly light, as I remember the elves were depicted back in the day. So for the mid tone I used Kislev flesh, and for the darker tone I mixed up some Bugman's glow with the Kislev flesh. For the brightest highlights later on, I used some bone white. I think the outcome of the skin was pretty nice. Then I decided just to start on painting the thing I dreaded the most for this project, the non-metallic metal. I painted this blade for 2 evenings in a row just to get the feel for the rest of the metals. Miniac, the miniature maniac, has some good lengthy videos of the process. I got a lot of good tips from there, but for me it's basically just a lot of trying out what works and what doesn't until it looks good. This is how the blade ended up looking like, and I'm pretty happy with it. Next, for a break from the NMM, was some precision work. I painted the whites of the eyes, unfortunately off camera, and painted some black dots for the pupils. Then it was just a matter of painting the eyelids back and shaping the eyeballs with some of the darker skin tone mix. I actually did the eyes all over again off camera because I didn't like the way they looked at first. I spent probably at least an hour on honing it until I liked the way it turned out. I have never painted eyes like this before, but I was really happy that it didn't turn out to look like the old Katachan box art. Most of the time making this model was spent on the next few steps in making of the non-metallic gold. I won't explain it much in detail, since it was probably the most boring process I have ever done painting minis. Now that I have a lot more understanding of what to do, I don't think it will take half as long. Basically, in short, what I did was slowly building up the browns from a very dark to a very saturated brown, and then again from brown to golden yellow. The effect is achieved by covering less and less surface area the lighter the tone gets, while keeping in mind where the bright points and the reflections should be, depending on the shape of the object. I once again had to fix the staff that had broken off for the 3rd time, and this time it left a small gap on the backside of the staff. So I had to add some green stuff there in the middle of the painting process. It should hold now, but I was unable to completely save this part of the staff with paint because of the uneven surface. But it's not in an eye-catching spot, so I can live with it. Fun fact, if you search on this miniature from eBay, almost all of the staffs are broken from this same exact spot, and a lot of them are actually even sold without the top part of the staff completely. I'm so glad I didn't lose this part. I still remember when I broke it like 15 years ago. Next, I base coated the jewels all over the miniature. I wanted the small jewels to be red for contrast, while the bigger ones were blue. I gave the metals an edge highlight to make them look even brighter by using some bone white. I decided that the gold looked too bright and shiny for this old model, and it was mostly because of the bright edge highlights, so I glazed all over it with a very thin glaze of brown to make everything just a bit darker. This technique actually altered the look just the way I wanted. Instead of just running it into the crevices like a wash would, I actually wanted to control the glaze to dull everything down a bit, and I really liked the difference this step made. Then I went back on highlighting the jewels all over the miniature by adding a lighter tone in the opposite corner from where the light was coming from. Remember, if you have a lot of different lenses or jewels around the miniature, the brightest part won't always be on the same side. After the highlight on the jewels, I wanted to saturate the gold a bit more, so I did the same thing as I did with the brown just before, but this time with a saturated yellow. Again, this thin glaze of yellow made the whole gold feel much warmer and brought some life to it. I think this trick will come handy in the future again, if something just doesn't feel right. But now I decided that the armor was finally complete, and I'm very proud of it. For the last step of painting, I added some small white dots on the jewels as a treat for a job well done. And the paint job was complete.
Hi, it's me from the future real quick. I just wanted to explain why the video took so long to make. Is that me and my girlfriend were actually moving at the time of making this video, so that's why the editing has been taking so long, because I just had not had access to my computer. As well as I've had a lot of cool upcoming projects. I can't wait to show you guys. I've been buying and selling a lot of old miniatures, and I'll be sure to show them in the next video while it comes. So basically that's it, and probably the next video will come out a bit sooner. I hope you're enjoying the video, and let's get back to it.
Now, to really sell the retro look, I superglued and green stuffed the Mini on a 25 by 25mm square slotted base, and superglued on some cat litter for some chunky grass. I just happened to buy the cat litter the day before for dirt cheap because the packaging was broken. I thought it was perfect for making authentic looking old school bases with that 90s saturated chunky grass that was the hottest thing back then. I didn't have any of the usual bright green or goblin green paint they used back in the day, so I mixed up some from a very dark green and some yellow, and then I applied it all over the base. For the rim, I did a few thinner coats and added a bit more yellow to distinguish the rim from the top of the base. The last step was to dry brush some yellow on top of the grass chunks, and I feel like this is when it all clicked together. And now for the grand reveal. This is the final result. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I think Teclis turned out great, and all the new things I tried out really taught me a lot. I definitely want to practice more on some of these new techniques. It felt so amazing to finally get this model finished after such a long time of painting. And while I'm definitely happy that it's over, I think it was absolutely worth the effort, and it really got my hobby juices flowing again for some other projects to come. If you want to be around when I upload similar content next time, be sure to subscribe to this channel. It would really be appreciated, since starting out YouTube these days is really hard, and I hope that the effort I put into these videos show through. I created this channel mainly to just talk about all my Warhammer and painting stuff. I just can't seem to be able to shut up about these past few months. So basically I'm just sparing everybody around me while simultaneously making content. I really hope that somebody would find this interesting, and please do give some feedback in the comments, and you can also check out my Instagram where I post my finished miniatures. But on that note, have a good one, happy painting, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye. That we not and show you that without